welcome to another great edition of Mississippi Stories. And today really is great. I always say that every week, but this is going to be a great edition. And I tell you what, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the news lately, but we're going through some tough times. I know you're shocked. You're like, no, Marshall, I think everything's just great. Well, that's fine. And if it is, I'm coming over to your house. But I tell you, the last 2 or 3 years have been really tough on everybody. I think everybody's lost something. And our guest today is an inspiration. And sadly, you've probably seen her on the news. And she's had a couple blows that I think would have crippled anybody. But instead of hitting her knees, she hit her knees in a good way and has gotten back up and is making a huge difference. And frankly, I don't even want to tell Dr. Alyssa Killebrew's story in one little bit because she's going to be able to do it way better than I am. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Marshall.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I think probably Horseshoe Lake is a good place to start. It's I guess, a suburb of Chula, you could say, or it's in the general vicinity.
It is. It's a suburb of Chula, and I grew up in Lexington, Mississippi.
Okay.
About 15, 20 minutes from
up the hill.
Yeah.
So, and you met this guy named Keath, and I guess maybe technically he was maybe from Horseshoe. I throw that out there, but I was like that part of the Delta anyway. And you met him. Y'all were in high school. Did you meet in high school or did you know each other all along?
We did not know each other until his home burned to the ground when he was 15 years old. Yeah. And he moved to Lexington from Horseshoe.
Okay.
And began going to high school with me. And he would tell me this story many, many times. He would say, I looked at my good friend Angie Carpenter and I told her, I said, I'm going to marry that girl one day.
Wow.
And he was so persistent with me. Initially, my dad wasn't too sure about his youngest daughter dating Keath, but soon he developed such a great love for Keath, and Keath and I dated on and off through high school. I went to college at University of Mississippi, and then I ended up over at Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. And Keath followed me up there. He was initially going to try to work in Nashville, and we were going to live in Nashville. And his brother called him one afternoon and said, brother, I found some land, let's farm. And Keath had farmed all of his life. And so Keath moved home. And when he left Nashville, he took my heart with him too. Oh. And so I moved back. First, I moved back to Oxford and I started working on a master's in counseling. And then I transferred over to Delta State University and finished my master's in counseling and began working at the mental health center there. Keath and his brother amassed about a 17,000 acre farm operation and farmed cotton, soybeans, rice, peanuts, wheat, and even ventured to grow watermelons, and were incredibly successful together. Keath and I had lots of dreams together as a couple, but really the most important dream and hope was for us to be able to have children. Yeah. And so I worked my way through my master's degree and my PhD, and we were never able to have children. And so I ended up finding a facility in Colorado. And I know lots of people in Mississippi have been to that facility after they've tried everything. And we went and we were successful, had our first little girl, Vivian. And right after Vivian was born, we were just absolutely tickled to death. Keath said to his Aunt Linda, he said, I tell you what, he said, if I had known I would love being a father this much, we would have started early and had a schoolyard full of babies. He absolutely adored Vivian, everything about being a daddy, and we just had a ball with it. So we tried again and went back to Colorado after she was born and ended up getting pregnant again. And so I was pregnant with our little girl, Sarah Elizabeth, and we had a great tragedy with her. We went to the Peabody
Mm-hmm.
to spend our Thanksgiving. Keath liked to get away for the holidays sometimes. And so we went to the Peabody and ate a wonderful meal. And I told him, I said, honey, I just don't feel the baby moving today. And so he said, you know, you need to call the doctor. I called and they told me different things to do. You know, you drink something cold, lay on your side, and nothing really worked.
Mm-hmm.
And later we found out that our little girl died, but she died because we both had COVID. And we found out that we had COVID when we went to the hospital. And so it was one of the things that really, really brought us both to our knees in just a tremendous amount of pain. And I had lost my grandmother, who was just the rock of Gibraltar for our family, and I just loved with all my heart. And that was a terrible blow. I had lost my best friend, Sarah Roberts, and she was more like a sister to me than just a friend. And she died of breast cancer the year before. And, you know, I said to Keath after I saw he was just having a really, really hard time with it. And I said, you know, I'm struggling, you're struggling. Why don't we just go away together and go to a retreat house so that, you know, we can go and do some grief work. And so we both went to a place called the Golden Willow for a week. Mm-hmm. And it is in the mountains, the Monte Cristo Mountains, which are in Taos, New Mexico. So we went and we stayed a week, and we were loved on, and we were taught about the importance of dealing with all the traumas that have occurred, that it's not just the grief that you're going through in that moment, but usually it brings up all the other griefs that you've been through, the things that happened when you were a child. And so we did timelines of our grief and heartaches together and shared those with each other. And the beauty of it is, after we did our grief work together, we then got to plan for the future. And we got to figure out a way to turn our pain into purpose. And so we both decided, Keith's a farmer, I'm a psychologist, let's do something together and let's help children. And so, you know, we sat down and we talked to a couple of advisors and mentors and asked them, how could you even go about starting something like this? And people just started showing up and teaching us how to do it. And so Keath and I own a farm with his brother and his brother's wife in Flora. And so we built a camp out at our Root Hog farm in Flora, Mississippi. And we had farm to table, we had ropes courses, we had equine therapy, art therapy, we did individual therapy. And we did a 2-week long therapeutic intensive. And we sort of modeled it like the one that is in Tennessee. It's called On-Site. Adults who are struggling can go to On-Site, and On-Site is geared to really help you deal with grief, deal with depression, deal with anxiety. And we modeled it much like On-Site, but On-Site is fairly expensive. It cost about $5,300 for 4 days. Wow. And so we tried to make this, you know, more cost effective. But the really important thing about the SEK camp that we started is that we believe that prevention and teaching kids how to deal with pain and to deal with the inevitable suffering that occurs is paramount. And both Keath and I had wished that we had a camp like this, and we created what we wish for.
You know, I've always heard that, you know, if you could reduce childhood trauma and the effects of it, that would make the DSM, which is the textbook for folks like you, to all the basic maladies, I guess you can have mentally, that it would be about this thick.
Yep. You're looking at it.
Yeah.
It's right there.
Yeah. The DSM-5. Yeah. I mean, but seriously, I mean, it's so important for kids to be able to work through the trauma and through the grief and all the different things. What ages were the kids that would come to the camp?
So we treat kids ages 13 to 17.
That's brilliant. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. How many kids do you normally have at a time, and how long does it last?
So this year we're going to have kids that are ages 13 to 17. We'll do
Mhm.
it starting June the 12th through the 16th, and we'll
Yeah.
have 48 kids.
Okay.
We decided that we'd like to have it at a place that's already set up like a camp, and the
Yeah.
camp is called Tanglewood, and it's in Lawrence, Mississippi.
Okay.
So that's where we're going to have it this year.
Okay. So you're going to have it there. Eventually, you'll move it to the farm. At one point, you had Rocky the kangaroo. Do you still have Rocky? Because Rocky
Yes.
was a bad boy and ended up becoming famous on the news.
He did. We still have Rocky. Rocky's doing great. He had an abscess, and that was the reason that we had him in Madison. And one of the local kids let him out, so he made his debut down I-55. And the funniest part was that I was 7 months pregnant chasing him down I-55.
Everybody's like, okay, the world is definitely upside down right now. There's a kangaroo and a crazy lady chasing him.
Yes, pregnant crazy lady.
Pregnant. Oh yeah, I forgot that. The most important part, because you probably didn't feel like running down I-55 at that point.
No,
And it's
no.
amazing because it's like, I know it's just funny. It's like suddenly it started popping up on Facebook. I think I just saw a kangaroo. It's like, yeah, it's like, seriously, you just saw a kangaroo. But anyway,
With
it
a
did
big
have a
abscess. His cheek was that big.
Oh wow, bless his heart. So I mean, he was a therapy kangaroo,
A therapy kangaroo.
and he
yes.
wasn't one of those kangaroos you see that punches people or anything like that. He was a
No,
happy
no,
kangaroo,
happy kangaroo.
and it did have a happy ending. That's
It
good.
did have a happy ending. He's back on the farm and he's doing great.
Oh, that's great. And then like a month later, just absolutely, you talked about all the loss you had suffered at that point, and you're probably thinking, okay, this is getting into Job territory. It can't get any worse. And honestly, you got the phone call, the darkest moment that you could have ever had in your life.
I did. Keith and our souls were just bound, and we had the greatest love I could ever imagine.
Yeah.
And, I had looked to spend my whole life with this man who just lit me up in every way. My niece would say, the two of y'all are too much. You knew the love we shared by just being around us. We just doted on each other and laughed out loud at each other's jokes that other people didn't think were funny. And we're pregnant with our first son together. And, life was good. We were heading to South America to start a new venture.
I was to say, what's even lit y'all up on, what made you think South America? I mean, that to me, that's just such an interesting story in its own right.
So this is fairly interesting to share. My family, the Keeler family, came to Shelby, Mississippi, and founded an area of the Mississippi Delta and started farming cotton there.
Yeah.
And Keith was always amazed at the story of my great-great-grandfather, F.B. Keeler, who came over in the mid-1800s. And he just was fascinated in what he did. And Keith and his brother traveled over to South America and found a land that was and is much like the Mississippi Delta in a region called the Chaco. And so when you drive over or fly over from Asunción into the Chaco, it's like you're going back 40 to 50 years.
Oh, wow.
And there, are people toting water, there are outhouses, there are old vehicles that, look like something you would see in the 50s or the 60s, people driving around. And Keith flew over with his brother and found this beautiful, beautiful region, went and got soil samples and said, honey, the soil is exactly like the Mississippi Delta. We have to go teach these people how to farm cotton.
Yeah. And really, honestly, Keath knew about as much about cotton as anybody on the planet.
Absolutely. He could
Yeah.
farm cotton on concrete. The man was just a brilliant cotton farmer.
Yeah.
The best I've ever seen. And many people would agree with that.
Well, yeah, you don't end up with 17,000 acres over 6 counties unless you're pretty good at it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And he was humble about it, though. You know, Keath wasn't one that tooted his own horn. But he knew that he had something that he could offer these people that he had met there in Paraguay. And so he traveled over and met with a Mennonite family that really wanted to farm cotton. And they introduced him to the president of the country, and the president opened doors and helped with a strategic plan for Keath and myself to go. And as soon as our baby was born, we were heading over. We would be there right now, and we'd be farming cotton. You know, tragically, Keith's plane went down in the Chaco. And, you know, I got to go a month ago, and I got to see where his plane went down. I got to see the farms where he had toured while he was there. I got to speak to all the people that he had met with. He was working on getting a residency there and also a green card so that we could invest and start business there to farm cotton. He wanted to build a community around cotton with churches and schools, and really have like a little community, much like where he grew up in Horseshoe, which is a real cotton community.
How important was it for you to be able to go back and to see it and to be able to release your grief there?
It was everything, Marshall. I told you before, you know, everybody grieves differently.
Yeah.
Some people, they can't touch the pain yet. They have to avoid it for a bit. For me, I have to go to the pain. It is the only way I've ever found to heal, and go and sit with it long enough to where it doesn't hurt as bad. And so I went to this place. I sat there for probably 3 hours and was able to really pay tribute to my husband. I put a cross up in the field that reads, "A pioneer on a mission for humanity." And I have a beautiful, beautiful cross there that I'm very proud of. Share a picture of that with you as well.
I know when you're working through that grief and you're working through what's next, and you see somebody like Keath, and like I told you before, and I don't know if I told you while we're recording, Keith's one of those kind of people that when you read about him and read about his life, and you read his obituary and you just regret you never had a chance to meet him, you know. And I had talked to a couple of people who knew him and a couple of people that lived in your neighborhood, and it was like he was like a rock star, you know. Literally, he'd pull up, get out of the car, and the kids would run to him, you know. He just was like that, you know, just this bigger than life personality. And so here you are, you know, and I think your quote here is bitter or better. That's your choice. And you got to figure out what you're going to do next on that. But I mean, before I ask you, what are you going to do next? But also too, when you're sitting down with your patients and they're dealing with grief also, you have a very unique perspective from this. You know exactly what they're going through. And when you give them advice, it's not coming from your head, it's coming from your soul.
It's coming from my heart. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So how do you, I mean, number one, I know you have a scholarship in his honor now, and I think that's, and I'll let you tell us a little bit about that. But how do you honor somebody that literally has been your soulmate from high school, and then they're taken from you too quickly? How do you honor them properly?
There's no real way to honor a person that is he was just a larger than life human.
Yeah.
I can only try to raise our children well and teach them the values that he had for his life and for our life together. That's the most important thing I can do. And to teach every child that I come in contact with the importance of working with their hands, never giving up, you know, being willing to talk about their problems and share their problems and delegate and ask for help when they need it. You know, that's the only way that I feel like I can really honor him is by teaching people who he was. And so I have decided, to do that through a foundation that is housed over with Jane Alexander. Jane
Jane's
is,
amazing. Yeah. I
isn't she
love Jane.
wonderful?
Yeah.
And so we have a scholarship there for kids that we're given $6,000 for scholarships
Wow.
starting over at the fairgrounds. We've already chosen 3 students who will receive those scholarships, and so I'm really excited and proud of that. And then we're hopeful to have a big fundraiser with a rodeo.
Yeah.
And so we're planning to have a tribute Keath Killebrew Memorial Rodeo coming up. We're not quite sure if we're going to do it this year or next year, but a lot of people are really excited about that. And I've got a guy named Arden Barnett who's going to help us.
Oh, Arden. Yeah. Arden. Yeah. If you need anything done, Arden's the guy.
He's the guy.
Yeah.
He's accepted he said, this will be my first rodeo.
Literally. Yeah. Literally.
Literally his first rodeo. But he and a guy named Matt Ginn, who actually introduced Keath and myself.
Oh.
Matt's going to be the announcer, and he's bringing in his rodeo, and they'll have bull riding and bullfighting, and they'll have dogs with little monkeys riding on their back. And there was nothing more that Keath loved than a good rodeo.
Where are you going to have it? You're going to have it
at the state fairgrounds.
At the fairgrounds. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
It'll be at the Coliseum. Two days is what we're shooting for, but I'm going to let Arden kind of put his head together with the other major players and make a decision about when and how and all of that.
Oh, that'll be so much fun.
Yeah.
That'll be so much fun. So that, he's smiling about that one. So
I know he's smiling about that. And he's smiling about the fact that I went back to Paraguay and I met with every person that he met with. And I went ahead and applied for a residency in Paraguay. And I also applied for my green card. And I'll be going back in a month to start the process of doing something there in his honor. I'm looking into maybe opening a cotton gin. Or maybe I'll go over there and farm. But I'm going to definitely go and do something there in Paraguay in his honor.
So where do you get your strength, and do you bottle it?
So my strength really comes from, I've got very, very strong faith. And I know that God has trusted me with this great pain, and he's going to give me the strength to walk through this every day.
Yeah.
I'm a devout Christian, and that is one of the things that we are in the process of working with Pine Lake. Keath Love, Chip, and Christy Henderson. And so they're going to help us with SEK this year. And they have brought in their whole team, and they are going to be teaching the Christian principles to the kids while I do the mental health counseling and mental health groups for the kids. So we're actually partnering together for this SEK camp this coming year. So I'm real excited about that.
Your business, obviously, it's Essential Touchstones, and you do a lot of counseling. You do work with kids a lot. You do work with adults, and you work in prisons. That's what an interesting portfolio of at the end of the day, though, what do you think is the main thing that you work with your patients? I mean, what is the main area?
So my main area of expertise is trauma, and I also work with personality disorders. I work with individuals who suffer from borderline personality disorder. And, Marsha Linehan was a brilliant lady who became a psychologist, and she created a treatment for the treatment-resistant mental illness, borderline personality disorder.
Yeah, that's that one and narcissism are two that are very hard to treat.
Difficult to treat. Yes. And so DBT is something we offer at my practice. We have a DBT program.
Oh, that's cool. Tell everybody what DBT is, because I know what it is.
DBT is dialectical behavioral therapy, and there are 4 modules. There's mindfulness, there's emotion regulation, distress tolerance, and interpersonal effectiveness skills. The cool thing about DBT is it's much like an AA model. With AA, you get a sponsor. With DBT, you get a DBT coach that you have access to in between sessions, because anybody can sit in a sterile therapy environment and talk about a problem, but you really need somebody when the times are tough in between sessions. And so that's what DBT offers. It's a little different than any other type therapy. You have access to a DBT coach in between session who will walk you through a DBT skill to use in real time.
So if you're a patient that's suffered trauma, whether it's childhood or older, and you're triggered, which is, and so the trick is, what you're saying is being able to pull yourself out of that waterfall and being able to observe it and realize, oh, this is just a thought. This isn't really me, or this isn't really reality. And that gives you at least to be able to deal with it head on, instead of just going with it the whole time, being held prisoner by it.
That's correct.
That's the cartoonist version of that, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. I didn't go to school for what you went to school with. I'm just seeing if I understood exactly.
So everybody has trauma, Marshall. Let me just tell you this. We all experience trauma in life, and we, have big traumas and we have smaller traumas that add up. The thing that makes a person have PTSD is the clustering of symptoms of avoidance, being triggered, and their constant reactivity to situations that aren't, that they're not real. Okay. And so individuals who suffer from PTSD end up benefiting from doing EMDR, brain spotting, or prolonged exposure. And those are 3 treatments that really do work for trauma, because all 3 of them require that you not avoid. You have to go to the pain. You can't run away from it. And, the thing that keeps PTSD and trauma alive is avoidance of it.
Yeah. Right. Oh, no, exactly. And that's your first instinct, because you want to avoid the pain. Exactly. And so even though it's not necessarily real pain, I'm doing finger quotes, you still, to you, there's a former Navy SEAL named David Goggins. He literally swears like a sailor because he was one. But his dad abused him, and it was horrific. I mean, just him and his brother and his mother and everything else. And they broke away and everything, but he now does ultra marathons, and it's just so fascinating.
His book is wonderful.
Yeah.
I have it on my shelf.
Isn't that really well done? And it's like, and the audio book on it's really good too, because it's like a podcast, but you understand that he literally substituted one pain for another. And he was able to do it, and he's able to turn him into sculptured, Adonis, more or less. But I just thought it was fascinating. And I had, not to totally get too off the topic, I had interviewed an author named Carl Malanis, who wrote it was a Marine. He was both a Silver Star recipient from Vietnam and a Rhodes Scholar. And just, he was a hero and brilliant. And so he's written several books. One of them was called Matterhorn, which is probably one of the best war books I've ever read. But he basically assaulted a machine gun nest and saved all of his other Marines, and came home from the war with horrific PTSD. A guy honked at him one day while he's taking his daughter to school, ended up beating the windshield in with his fist, and then he woke up. And I did an interview with him, and I brought up trauma and everything, and he just lit up, and he literally talked about his journey. And he does yoga, and yoga is what literally has saved him, is because he's able to pull himself out of that waterfall of whatever. And it's just fascinating. Like I said, I think what you're saying but the point is being not running from your pain, but turning into it. That's the truth. Right. And that's what you've done.
And one of the things that happens is we get cut off from our bodies when we have trauma. We're all in our head. And so when you do yoga, it gets you back into your body. And that's where the healing happens. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, yeah. That's brilliant.
It's so true. The body does keep the score when we have physical and mental, emotional traumas.
Well, it kind of shuts down your frontal cortex, right? You're dealing with strictly with your amygdala.
Yes, exactly. And it's fight or flight. It's flee or run.
So you're basically pumping yourself full of cortisol the whole time. And you almost get addicted to it. It's kind of interesting. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
And that goes back to the camp, to the retreat. And that's all the things that you're doing, the ropes course, the equine therapy, the yoga, the art, everything else is to be able to break that connection
That's
with
right.
the kids, so that, and not necessarily, make them face their pain, but do it in a very kid-friendly way.
A very gentle way
Yeah.
with a lot of love and a lot of nurturing. And this year they'll be spending the night there.
Oh, that's cool.
And so we'll have overnight SEK camp this year. So I'm really excited about that.
Okay. The story of the name is beautiful in two
Oh.
different directions. Tell us where the name came from.
So I named my little girl Sarah Elizabeth, and Sarah was my best friend that I lost to cancer. Elizabeth was my grandmother, who really helped me through my own grief and trauma when my mother was diagnosed with cancer
Yeah.
as a little girl. And so I honored both of those two very important people in my life, naming my child, my second daughter, Sarah Elizabeth Killebrew.
Oh,
And seek is biblical. Seek and you
mhm.
shall find. Ask and it will be given unto you. And so that's kind of where the name for these camps comes from.
Yeah.
Seek.
I love that. I love that. I really do. It just makes me smile on many different levels. Because I know every time you say the name, it heals you a little bit as well.
Does.
And
It
that's
does.
beautiful. Well, I mean, obviously you don't have a ton of slots, but how can people get involved, and how can people find the camp and get signed up for it?
If people are interested, we have a website that's set up. It's sektherapeuticintentives.org. And you're welcome to email us through that through that website. And we would love to, we're accepting volunteers and help. I'm actually doing trainings right now with my staff. And so, I'll be teaching about mental health techniques and ways to walk through trauma, but I require that everybody do their own grief work before they become one of our grief counselors and one of our trauma counselors.
Oh,
So
you mean you don't want people to make it worse? I mean, I signed up for this camp and I just feel terrible now. Thank you. That just makes all the sense in the world. So I will not be part of it because obviously I still have a lot of work to do. No. Okay. Like I said, I think you're uniquely qualified to help people right now about what we're going through in the world. And I mean, literally, I was sitting there doom scrolling on Twitter just a minute ago on social media, looking at all the things that are going wrong in the world. And then I look out the window and it's actually a pretty day. And there was a real beautiful bird out there. And my reality actually is not bad, but boy, I look at what's going on in the world. I want to get in a fetal position.
yeah.
I mean, the last 2 years have lasted 2 decades. I don't think we're going through anything that our grandparents didn't go through. I think about my grandmother who went through the 1918 flu and then the Great Depression and then World War II with little kids. And, that must have been terrifying too. But what advice would you give right now to a parent or to just somebody who's completely just about to freak out because of what's going on and just everyday life?
So I would say, first of all, I want to validate that I feel like your fears and your trauma is real.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to be the person that says, "Oh, just get over it." These are real. This is real.
That would have been my football coach.
Right.
Rub a little dirt on it. That was it.
Right.
You'd have a bone sticking through your skin and he'd be like, rub a little dirt on it.
Rub a
So
little dirt.
you're not that kind of coach.
I'm
So,
not that kind of coach. If you
okay.
need that kind of coach, I'm not the person for you. You might
Good.
want to see someone else.
Good. I
But
like you better already. So
yeah, validate.
Yeah.
And, I would say it's okay to ask for help. I have had to really delegate now.
Yeah.
I've got a whole team of people around me. It takes a village. And so I would say, ask for help. Go and talk to a party that is objective. All of your friends are going to tell you what you want to hear. Your family's probably going to tell you what you want to hear. Go see someone that's objective that can
Yeah.
help you look at this through some different lenses. And that would be my advice. That's what I would do.
it's actually brilliant advice. And it's hard because I think Think about the pandemic, and the pandemic, because today, as you and I are talking, today is the 17th anniversary of Katrina. And that was a trauma that was very easy to see. I mean, it was pretty obvious that the Gulf Coast was gone, and by golly, those folks needed our help, or people in Hattiesburg needed the trees cut off their houses. I mean, it was a trauma that was the virus was literally like Russian roulette. It was like everybody got a different experience with it. You obviously had a horrific outcome because of it. Some people might get the sniffles, other people were on a ventilator, other people passed away. And it's like, but we all went through it by ourselves because we were in isolation. And
That's
then
right.
we get on social media and we scream at each other.
Mhm.
I mean, and like I said, my take on it was I finally had to back off of it a little bit because I realized everybody has lost something, whether it's, a night out with friends or their job, or in your case, their child. I
Mhm.
mean, where do you think we're going to go? How can we get past this as a nation and heal and maybe even come back together a little bit? Because it seems like we're just totally like somebody hit a piece of glass with a rock and just shattered it.
My advice is non-judgmental listening,
Yeah,
period. Non-judgmental listening can just be healing,
yeah,
just sitting with people who don't think exactly like you do and just listening. You don't have to agree, but listen to each other.
yeah,
Just listen to each other. Our grandparents' generation, they sat at the dinner table, everybody talked things out, and everybody didn't have to believe in the same things. They just listened to each other and they
yeah.
gave each other grace and they gave each other permission to be different if they needed to be different, and think differently if they needed to think differently. And so I love what you said. There were so many different reactions to this and a lot of polarization. And when we get polarized, we get sick.
Yeah, we definitely do. I like that, Grace.
Yeah, we can't get too far on either spectrum. We've got to learn how to have balance, and we've got to learn how to hold the tension of the opposites.
And generally, I mean, say you and I, for instance, we may disagree on everything, but we have children, and I mean, so there are things that when you carry on a conversation, there are areas that you can go and build that trust and build that relationship, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And have respect for other people that are different than you are. It's okay if they have a different opinion. You do have a lot of similarities too, because you're a human walking around,
Yeah.
with two legs and have children, for example. I agree.
Yeah, definitely on that. So, well, as I want to be meaningful of your time, because you're a very busy person. In fact, I don't know how you do it. I mean, because I remember having two kids about the same age spread, and we were very busy during that time in our lives. So,
Yes. Yes.
but just let me warn you, it goes by in a blink. So it goes by
I
very
know.
quickly. They'll be going off to their first job here sooner than later. But
Well, earlier today, Marshall, I was I realized that it's going to go by in a blink, and my little girl and little boy are home with RSV. And
yeah,
so I took my little girl and we went and got rocks, and we've been painting rocks this morning. And it's just been so nice. We're going to put them in something and
yeah.
make a little Halloween, some kind of little decoration.
You're very artistic too. And I just say it just I'm looking at some of your artwork in the background, but that's a big part of what you do, and that's very healing for you, isn't it? Is
That
creating
is my
artwork.
therapy.
Yeah,
I told you before we started this that, I knew that I started getting better when I was like, I'm ready to go create something. I'm ready to go paint. I'm ready to go make some stained glass windows. When I start to create, I feel like I'm getting better. And that is a true sign that my patients are getting better
yeah.
when they are able to go and create something outside of their heads.
It's funny because if I'm sitting down doing a cartoon, that's work, but if I'm doing a painting, I get into flow.
There
And
you
I
go.
think getting into flow is incredibly important when it comes to creativity, because you got to be able to, it literally, it does disconnect that amygdala, and it does pull you away from being in fight or flight all the time. When you get lost in something that you're doing and 2 or 3 hours passes and you wake up and go, wow, that was great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, you and I were talking about the movie Top Gun Maverick, which
Yes.
I'm quite a bit older than you, so I actually saw the first Top Gun literally right after I graduated high school. It came out into the theaters, so that just tells you how ancient I am. Just add 18 and 36, and you know exactly how old I am. But I truly loved this new movie, and I felt like that. Came in with very low expectations because it was a sequel 36 years later, and I love airplanes, so I went in there for airplanes and came out with two really well. There was three things. Admiral came telling Maverick that his time was up, and Maverick saying maybe so, but not today. I felt like that was good, but I thought Penny's advice to him to Maverick about if you lose your wingman in a fight, and you lost your wingman in a fight.
I did.
But you haven't given up fighting.
I have not given up fighting because I believe in eternity, and I'm going to get to see him again. And
Yeah.
He's making a way there for us in our next adventure.
I can imagine a whole lot of cotton growing and the clouds being made of cotton.
That's what I keep thinking about.
Yeah. If I were going to do one of the cartoons that I always end up drawing, it end up looking something like that. Yeah. And the other one was when, this is all into spoiler territory, but seriously, folks, the movie's been out a long time. And if you haven't seen it, that's your fault. So when he goes and visits Iceman, and Iceman literally is faced with his own death. He knows that his time is near, and he gives Maverick probably the best advice of all.
Let go. Yeah. My favorite is when he said, "Don't think, just do."
Yeah.
Don't think, just do.
Oh, I've been not thinking for a long time, Alyssa. I'm good at that. I mean, come on, you've seen my cartoons. You know what I'm capable of or not capable of. So
let go, don't think, just do.
Exactly. How can folks find out more about you or about what you're doing? Just throw out a couple, websites.
Sure. So you can look on KillebreWPsychological.com or essentialtouchstones.com.
Okay. This has been delightful. And I've got to do a quick ad and then we will wrap up. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, this is I want to thank once again the folks at UMMC for sponsoring today's Mississippi Stories. It's the state's only academic medical center. Its education, research, and healthcare missions share the objectives of improving the health of the state's population and eliminating health disparities. It's located in Jackson. It encompasses 7 health science schools, including medicine, nursing, health-related professions, dentistry, pharmacy, graduate studies, and population health. The medical center's health enterprise includes the state's only level 1 trauma center, only children's hospital, and the only organ and bone marrow transplant program. For more information, you can visit www.umc.edu. Alyssa, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marshall. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for watching this episode of Mississippi Stories. Make sure to subscribe to the Mississippi Today YouTube channel and click the bell to be notified every time a new video uploads.